the implementation of Constituency Development Fund, which is CDF, as a public finance tool in four constituencies, which are namely Chisamba, Kasama, Central, Livingston Central, and Masaiti. The monitoring exercise was done in May of this very year, 2023. Had three objectives, which were to in the implementation of CDF, to monitor accountability in the implementation of CDF, to monitor community participation in the implementation of CDF. And the overall goal of the monitoring exercise was to assess transparency, accountability, and community participation in the implementation of the Constituency Development Fund. So, as be looking at a lot of issues to do with this particular exercise that Jctr actually carried out and what their findings were. But before we even get into all of that, for someone that's listening and hearing this particular organization for the very first time, can you break down who Jctr is for us?
Thank you very much, Lucy. So when it comes to Jctr, which would be acronyms, the full would be the Jesuit Center for Theological Reflection. So this organization is a faith-based organization, a non-profit making organization that is much into research and advocacy work. So in our advocacy work, of course, we'll target policy, but also importantly, being a voice of the voiceless. But we know our community in terms of media spaces. So there is social media, there is internet, radio, TV, and people now are beginning to speak for themselves. I think if you look back, there were no much conversations around participation in governance processes. But then also we focus on some aspects in our work, and some of them being social accountability, where we look at the management of public finances, and also looking if they really reach the intended beneficiary and being able to hold duty bearers accountable. And I think for these conversations we'll have today, that's where we'll center much on. And then, of course, there are other activities that we do or interests we have, like climate justice, where we look at issues to do with climate change, how they are affecting people, and how they can adapt to climate change. Then aspects to do with human rights and good governance. Then, of course, we are in conversations around public finance management, as well as debt restructuring. And then in terms of our presence, I think we are largely present in all parts of the country. This is because we fall under the Catholic Church. So we would work with sister organizations like Caritas, and also would be under the bishops. So largely we are present in all the parts of the country. So in a nutshell, that's what I would say Jctr is. And our simple vision is just wanting to see a just Zambian society where everyone enjoys the fullness of life. And I think as the conversation goes, that's why I'll be unpacking most of the issues will be relating to enjoying the fullness of life.
Okay. Now, great to know, and you sound like a very busy organization with the very different things that you do for the many communities out there. You said that the project that we're talking about today, right? So you launched in May of this year a monitoring exercise for four constituencies. And there's obviously things that you found out. So you say the project aims to enhance transparency, accountability, and community participation in the implementation of CDF. So what I'd like to find out from you is, why did you choose to focus on CDF when there's so many? I know that just when we hear the word letters Jctr, we know that there's a lot of things that you focus on. Why did you take an interest in CDF particularly?
Thank you very much. And I think I'll be now diving from the issue around enjoying the fullness of life. Now, when you look at the issue of CDF, CDF is not new. I know since 1995 it has been there. And of course, 1996, we have it enshrined in the Constitution, that is Article 162. And again, in 2018, we have an Act, CDF Act. So in terms of pieces of legislation, and allow me please to mix the languages, Pemba, Nyanja,
please,
so that I get across to all I can.
Mm-hmm.
So, ilo CDF ilea ilekula, in terms of Vulupapulo, lulea ilekula 2016, by become Constitution. 2018, twakwata Act, iyo yalambo kulange fya kulabomba CDF, ba committee and the likes. Then we noticed that between 2010 and 2021, the increase in terms of financial allocation was not so much. I think from below a million, yaisako pali 1.6. And I think a number of organizations, we weren't much interested. Of course, we could do social audits around CDF, but it being 1.6, we felt, or maybe a lot thought, no, 1.6, what's 1.6 out of the total budget allocation, especially for constituents? But then we noticed that 2022, 2023 allocations, Shakulempia, it's beyond even doubling. You have probably 1.6 to 25. Already I had mentioned to the issue of monitoring public finance management.
Mm-hmm.
So to Ambok Ishimpia, because remember what I had said, our interest is to ensure that everyone enjoys the fullness of life. So we are interested in this money, not just because it's a lot, but because of the ideology behind Constituency Development Fund, which is one, to reduce poverty. Then two, to enhance community development. Now, when you look around community development, the individual in this case becomes very important. Of course, I had mentioned we want to see a just Zambian society.
Mm-hmm.
But in a society, we begin to realize, a society can sound so abstract. Chamfika fat society ni change. So to alambila pamuntu, an ordinary person, then again we'll have a family, then we'll have communities there. And since the person is involved in this society, we are also now then concerned about the well-being of this person. So that's why when we are interested in the issue of CDF, it's not so much about just knowing how much have we spent, has it been increased, but to be concerned with nashfika koshalingilo kufikako, and is it working with the intended purpose? And that's the biggest reason why we went into the issue of CDF, to say the way it's supposed to work, first of all, it's goal and objective to reduce poverty, to microfinance community development. For this to happen, we knew and we are convinced there should be transparency, there should be accountability, and there should be community participation.
So you've talked about how, all this, you've given us a history of CDF has always been there, but for some reason now it, since you've said it dramatically increased. Is that why, for example, that you took interest in now pay attention to CDF as
because of its objective, that it should reach the intended person. For us, we're not so much interested about increase, decrease, but it being able to have an impact on the intended beneficiaries. And what really got us more interested. Of course, prior to now it's called enhanced CDF. Prior to that, we could do social audits on projects, programs around CDF. Okay. But like when it was 1.6 million, for constituencies that would have maybe 20 wards, they will just divide. And when you divide by 20, you find maybe it's 300,000, 200,000 and all that. So we could follow up, but because of also the public interest has grown. And that's why we've said we need to safeguard this public financing too. Why? Because it's very vulnerable to the elite capture. With conversations around public investment, conversations around empowerment, those who are already in business and already doing well can easily benefit from CDF, and it leaves out the intended objective. And I'll be coming back now and then to it, which is alleviating poverty, and promoting community development. But also, it's very vulnerable to political capture. Politicians can easily ride on CDF to facilitate for their campaign promises. So it's those things that we've seen that we are saying, how then do we ensure that we safeguard CDF in terms of it, reaching the intended beneficiary? Bamayo pamusebo, abayiche bandi mukomboni, abantu abapusana ukwati muri ine CDF tibachitamo shani benefit. So kulunda nangu kuchefya, it's not the real issue, but CDF okufika okoyiringira okufika.
Okay. Well, you are listening Jesuit Center for Theological Reflection program here on 5FM. Time is 10:20. My studio guest for today is Program Officer at the Jesuit Center for Theological Reflections, who is John Kunda Sauti. And we're talking about CDF, and this is all under the project or monitoring exercise that was carried out in May by Jctr to monitor